Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Plague Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, October 23rd, 11 days till Election Day, or I guess what we properly now call election deadline. And we are talking about last night's presidential debate with Los Angeles Times political correspondent Mark Z. Barabak. Thanks for joining me, brother.
Thanks for having me back.
So your takeaways, you wrote the takeaways from the debate last night, and up top you said nothing President Trump or Joe Biden said or did on stage seems likely to change a great many minds. This reminds me of the great old newsroom headline on every debate: candidates trade jibes on issues. So basically there was no new ground broken there.
No. I mean, to take a big step back, generally speaking, debates tend to be reinforcing events, right? You tune in and the candidate I liked did great and the other candidate was an idiot. And so, they tend to sort of reinforce most people's, the views they came into the debate with. That said, in this particular election, there's just such a small slice of the electorate that's still undecided. And we also have this overlay. I mean, I just looked a couple of minutes ago. I'm sure it's going to be outdated in the next hour. So as of last month, 52 million people had already. And just to give you a little sense that yesterday, when I kind of wrote my thing or pre-wrote my thing, it was at 47 million. Right. So in less than 24 hours, it's just crazy. The point being, a lot of people have already voted. A lot of people have already made up their minds. And all that said, there really wasn't a whole lot new. It's not to say, I don't want to suggest it was in any way a waste of time, but I didn't hear, if you followed the campaign even somewhat closely, I think you kind of knew, their personalities are well known by now. And they really didn't break a whole lot of new ground on issues. Now, if you're just kind of tuning into the issue part of this, you might have learned something new, because unlike the first debate, they actually had a discussion where you could talk about issues and lay out differences. It wasn't just a lot of yelling and screaming. So in that way, it was useful. But, again, I just didn't see anything that's going to change the fundamental direction of the race at this point.
Well, one of my many hats that I wear these days is Chief Morale Officer of the Biden Bedwetter Brigade in Santa Barbara, where people are endlessly worried that, something awful is going to happen. And the one thing that I heard last night, and then I saw some of the coverage this morning, he really botched in the discussion, I thought, of energy and oil and fracking, and he kind of he walked into a trap with Trump in a certain extent. He said, "You're going to end the oil industry," or something like that. And I guess the staff was trying to clean it up last night. You just wrote a piece about Texas and how sort of surprising that Democrats are playing in Texas. And I wondered about that, and also, Pennsylvania, which everyone is now obsessed about. In Western Pennsylvania, of course, fracking and energy is a huge issue. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that he did create unnecessary problems for himself with that response. I mean, his answer was, yes, I want to end the oil industry by bringing in new industries that will create a lot more jobs. This is reminiscent for some of us of Hillary Clinton 4 years ago, right? I want to put a lot of coal miners out of business, and then the rest of her statement was, and put them to work in green industries. Well, you, of course, you certainly know the old rule in politics: if you're explaining, you're losing. And the fact that they felt they had to go out and clean up what he had said, clean up on aisle 4. It was not good. Again, was it enough to make a difference? I mean, to take these serially. I mean, look, Texas is, close, and I did this story because I think it's notable. The fact that, Joe Biden is even in hailing distance. I think the money quote, a good one, was from Jim Henson, who's one of the great, to use a favorite word of yours, eggheads of Texas politics. But he put it well. He said, is it probable? No, but it's entered the realm of the plausible. So, and the bottom line too is Joe Biden does not need Texas to win. If he wins Texas, it's going to be, the 40th or so state in a massive landslide. Pennsylvania is different. Pennsylvania is competitive. Pennsylvania is really key I'm not going to use the Keystone. That's too obvious.
Oh, go for it.
Okay, the Keystone State is key. Is the Keystone? I mean, it's really, really important to Biden's campaign. Is this enough to cost him Pennsylvania? Maybe in a close race, but I always wonder. I mean, it's like these things will be clear once we know them, obviously. But are we overthinking this? I mean, are there that many?
That would be.
Are there that many undecided voters in Western Pennsylvania and the fracking industry that this is going to tip them one way or the other? I mean, again, it's sort of the inverse of chicken soup. It can't help, and it might even hurt. Is it dispositive? Are we going to look back and say that, Joe Biden lost the White House because of that one slip of the tongue? I kind of doubt it.
All right. Well, I want to credit you for being the only non-lawyer I've talked to in the last 6 months to use the word dispositive in a sentence. So
that's a Mark Mellman phrase, giving credit where it's due.
All right. So you had 8, count them, 8 takeaways. Of course, you had a co-writer, the indefatigable Melanie Mason was on the story this morning as well. So the Trump tones it down. He didn't set his alleged hair on fire. So I guess that was a plus. And apparently, Republicans were all giddy about that.
Yeah, I mean, we're grading on a curve. He restrained himself. I mean, there was a little bit of, as we said this morning, a tale of two Trumps. He was rather more sedate toward the beginning. He would do the little number, make eye contact with the Mario. Could I have my seat, please? Thank you. As the night wore on, he got a little bit more animated, a little bit more touchy, but nothing approaching the performance in the first debate. And, as someone pointed out, obviously he did something he doesn't like to do, which is listen to his advisors and other people who said, he thought the first debate was a great success. He really did. He thought it was terrific. A lot of people at home know it wasn't. And, Trump did something that we haven't seen a lot of, and that is he made an adjustment. So we're grading on a curve. So it was a vast improvement from the first performance.
Yeah, I thought it was actually a good night for him. I was sort of with the never Trumper grudging people saying, yeah, he did much better than before. You said Biden holds his own. We already talked about the oil and fracking thing. What about the watch, though? He did look at the watch.
Yeah. Although, it's funny. Okay, for those, which is to say the huge percentage of your audience who are
normal people, yes.
Yes, for both of you who may not remember. I mean, the watch became an issue, and boy, it's sad that I can spell this off the top of my head, but anyway, I'm going to do it. 1992 town hall debate, Bill Clinton, Ross Perot, President George H.W. Bush looks at his watch. It wasn't looking at the watch per se. It was this metaphor for a feeling that H.W. Bush didn't care, that he was out of touch, that he just wanted to get this thing over with. Biden looked at his watch, but these sorts of things only resonate if they play into an image. You know what I mean? And that's why H.W. Bush looked at his watch was damaging in a way that I don't think it's going to hurt Biden.
Well, the other thing was you had Clinton in that event, as I recall, hugging everybody in the place. And
yes, exactly.
I think that's where feeling your pain came from.
The great empath is hugging people and feeling their pain. And Bush is like, are we done yet?
We all get out of here.
Exactly. So again, these things matter when they play into a preconception or a sense of somebody in it could be good or it could be bad. In Bush's case, it was a bad way. I don't see people saying, if anything, Biden's the one politician in America who could maybe out-empath Bill Clinton. I even did a piece about that.
Yeah. Well, brief digression here. As you know, Trump world has been in a war with the Drudge report, which has gone very anti-Trump. And so they're trying to send all of their acolytes over to something called Revolver, which is a weird kind of second generation Drudge. They were all over the watch. I checked after the debate. They were, in fact, that's where I get most of my information from about the campaign. Now they were all over Pennsylvania and oil and the watch. So that.
But you know what, Jerry? But real quick, that's the problem. President Trump is talking to, I hate to use the preaching the choir cliche, but it's the shorthand for it, right? even if every single red-blooded, heart pitter-patter Trump lover in America votes, that's way short of a majority. He needs to expand his base. And I'm going to tell you, most people, A, aren't on Revolver, and B, have never even heard of it. So it's great to talk to each other, but he's living in this kind of walled off garden of his own design. And, you need to reach out.
Yeah, which brings us to your third takeaway, which was on the COVID pandemic, which you tale of two pandemics. You said it was fairy tale versus a pathology report, which I actually thought was the best line in your piece.
So, yeah, well, it was sort of like, oh, we're turning the corner and we had a spike, but it's over. And, you can see light at the end of the tunnel and happy days are assumed to be here again. And Biden was like, whoa, hang on a minute. Here's some facts. I mean, people are dying and they're dying at a faster rate. They're getting in. I don't know if the mortality rate, it is higher in some states. States are hitting record hospitalization rates. They're hitting record infection rates. Some states are having record deaths. I mean, we are in the midst of a third wave. Fortunately, here in California, we're not, but most of the rest of the country is in a really, really bad way. And it really was, like I said, it was sort of like this sort of, this kind of, hey, things are great, fairy tale, as I said, that Trump made up versus the reality, which is very, very grim.
And as a substantive issue, I mean, I thought that was one of the points in the debate where you could really see the clear difference, because there is a very serious balancing between public health, protecting the public health, and economic and the economy, opening up the economy. And boy, Trump really comes down heavy on opening up the economy, and we've got to live with it. He said the words, we got to live with it, and that was Biden's good comeback. We got to die with it. I do think though, Biden suffers from, I don't know if it's an inability or he just doesn't do it, of sort of speaking more directly, and saying, yes, we've got to open it up, but we've got to do it safely. He just gets he's not a linear speaker.
No. And to quote myself, I think I even said that. I think I even said, concise argumentation, linear thinking. Right? I mean, Joe Biden. I mean, if we're going to grade on a curve, Biden was actually pretty good for Biden, because it's like, you start over, you ask the time and you're getting a history of the cantons of Switzerland, right? I mean, the guy can't. So, he was fairly disciplined, but you're right. You can see there were certain points he came to make. It was very, very interesting. One of them was where they went after his son. We haven't talked yet about this, about Hunter Biden, about supposedly enriching his family, this and his family, that. And Biden then very showily turned to the camera and said, it's not about my family, it's about your family and the issues around the kitchen table. And, Trump kind of rolled his eyes and said, okay, typical politician. So it was a little stagey, but I mean, corny as it was, I think it's effective to the extent that I think it is true. I think most people aren't voting on Hunter Biden. I don't think they're voting on fracking in Western Pennsylvania. I think COVID, it's changed virtually every aspect of our life, right? Everyone, there's not a person in the world who has been unaffected by this. And at the end of the day, I really think this election, this campaign is about COVID.
Yeah. Although, again, Trump gave his most coherent defense of what he's done. He starts with that Cambridge University research, 2.2 million people would die if nobody did anything.
Right.
And so, that's what he grades himself on that. Look, we only got 250,000 bodies here in the corner. I mean,
right.
No problem. And I shut down China, which of course is, whatever. But he did, I thought, lay out his case in a more cogent way. So if you wanted to be for Trump, you could sort of say, well, okay, I guess.
I agree. This was one aspect of the debate where they actually had a conversation and you were able to hear different points of views. It wasn't about, this clown and this idiot and jabber over each other. You really could hear. And I mean, there are strong arguments for both cases, to open the economy, to open it faster, to open it slower. And I mean, you actually did have something approaching a thoughtful discussion that at the least gave you their respective perspectives on how to proceed on that. So that to me, like, I mean, look, I'm a political hack. I'm no, ivory tower or debate expert or anything. But if you're looking for, if you were a viewer and you tuned in and you sat there and you listened, you really did get a good sense of where each of them were coming from and what their differences were. So I thought it was one of the high points of the debate in that sense.
Yeah. And that was also the section where Trump referenced California and said, look at California, they're dying out there, dying. But he didn't mean people were dying. I don't think. I think he meant the economy was dying.
The economy, yeah. Well, and as I said at the top, we're actually doing very well. I mean, California, we have, knock on whatever you're going to knock on, we've done very well. I mean, we have not surged the way other places have now. We're entering the holiday seasons, and who knows. But yeah, that was noteworthy because this was, although it can almost be reflex. I mean, the president, when he wants a punching bag, California, we're here.
And then they talked about, I think you called it clear things up, basically race and Black Lives Matter. And this is the point where Trump tells everyone he's the least racist person here, as there's a Black woman who's moderating the debate, and then compared himself, of course, to Abraham Lincoln. And then Biden comes back and says, well, Abraham Lincoln here. And Trump, didn't get the joke. It's like he has no sense of irony. I mean, it was
or self-awareness. Yeah, not Trump's greatest moment. I mean, there again, he had the chance to denounce, people who are, tweeting white power, and his response was to, as you suggested, start talking about Abe Lincoln and sort of go back on this, talking point about I've done more for Black Americans than anyone since Abraham Lincoln, which on its face is ridiculous. But and the moderator came back at him and said, well, hang on. And he seemed genuinely flummoxed, right? It was like, well, wait a minute. It was sort of like, it's like, I have this set of talking points and this thing I believe, and if you move me off them, it's like, well, wait a minute. So it was not at all his greatest moment. Not surprisingly, given his history on this issue.
And she also asked a question, Kristen Welker, which you don't hear asked a lot in debate. She asked about environmental racism and how, neighborhoods of color end up next to, pollution plants. And he seemed to have that notion seemed to have never entered his cognitive space before. He also struggled with that one, whereas Biden, I thought actually more than he had previously, really went off on a systemic racism and wedded himself to that. I was surprised that Trump didn't come back with defunding the police at that point.
Yeah, I mean, boy, forgive the obvious, it's not meant as a pun, but issues like that for Trump are very, very black and white, if you will, and things like racial, environmental justice are just sort of outside his, it's either, you've locked away all these black and brown people with your crime bill, and I'm the best president since Abraham Lincoln. And once you move him off that, I mean, you're right. It's just something that he's never, I don't think, lived or experienced or just doesn't really grasp that reality.
Yeah, I felt that Biden also, I don't know if it's a missed opportunity or a turnover or what, but his discussion of the crime bill, basically apologizing for the whole thing. But, that was like an overwhelmingly majority passed bill, and it had the assault weapons ban, Dianne Feinstein's assault weapons ban in it, among other things.
I did a story on the crime bill. This was last summer, not this summer, but summer of 2019, as a walk up to the first debate. Kind of writing, I mean, look, I'm old enough to have covered the crime bill. And I remember at the time it was very controversial because they had things like midnight basketball and all these diversion programs. And you're right. And one of the people I interviewed for that piece was Barbara Boxer, who voted for the crime bill and pointed out, that crime bill contained the Violence Against Women Act. It contained the assault weapons ban, which, in other words, there's a lot of stuff in there the Democrats really loved. And there was even in my article, the senior black member of Congress, Jim Clyburn, supporting the bill and pointing out that at the time, there were a lot of black mayors. I mean, it's very easy in retrospect to look at it and say what a disaster it was. But at that time, there was a real concern in a lot of cities about a raging crack epidemic. And there were a lot of black mayors who came to Washington to lobby for that bill. So, you know, again, I'm not defending the bill. I mean, I agree with you. Biden could have done a better job, I believe, in pointing out, you know, forget about the politics and the atmosphere and the retrospect, but there's a lot of stuff in there that a lot of people really, really liked. And he has said, in fact, he's apologized for the portions that he felt were bad. But you're right, he could have done perhaps a better job talking up the parts that some of the people like.
Yeah, I think, you know, just another example of him sort of, you know, forgetting where he is on the court. You know what I mean? It's just like, this is a time where I could mention subtlety and detail and stuff. And he's just like, wow, wow. Anyway. All right. So then we get to the Hunter Biden stuff, family feud, as you call it. And, you know, this has been roiling the conservative or right wing, you know, Fox a bubble for the last week or 10 days. But I thought, you know, you really needed a secret Rudy Giuliani decoder ring to figure out what the hell Trump was talking about.
Yeah.
He didn't really sell it very well at all.
No, and again, this was a case of talking to his supporters. I mean, the mayor of Moscow and China, and you like I said,
sheets and pillowcases.
Yeah, it's sort of like, you know, it was sort of like, you know, walking into a movie, you know, 45 minutes into it, it's like, well, wait, what? I think it was almost a twofer on the part of Trump in that, you know, he could talk to his audience and get all that kind of stuff out there. But I think really what he was getting at, or what he had hoped to accomplish, was to get under Biden's skin and make him lose his temper. Because if there's one thing Joe Biden is very sensitive about, it's his family, it's his children. So I think, you know, besides getting all the stuff out there to the folks with the little decoder rings who could, you know, tune into it, it was getting under Biden's skin and waiting for that moment to have him, you know, lose it and have some kind of, you know, pitch a fit on TV. And it didn't happen. I would guess that, you know, Biden was very, very well rehearsed on it. He was ready for it. He saw it coming. And that, as we alluded to earlier, was the moment when he turned and looked very earnestly in the camera and said, it's not about my family, it's about your family. And Trump rolling his eyes and saying, you know, essentially, you know, there you go.
So do you understand why you know, when he gets attacked on that, Biden doesn't push back on Ivanka and Jared, you know, lining their pockets, and Don and Eric,
you know,
flying around the world on the public dime?
You know, my supposition is the feeling is the best route is, instead of saying my family is not as bad as your family, it's right, because if you start talking about his family, then it's hard to pivot and say it's, you know, it's not about my family. It's not about his terrible family. It's about your family, right? So I think they probably, I don't know. I haven't spoken with people inside the campaign. My supposition is they just decide, instead of engaging, let's just make it about your family, the American people. And, you know, he spoke, you know, I don't mean to be in any way cynical, but he did speak very movingly, you know, about the person who wakes up tomorrow morning and they'll be at the breakfast table, or reaches over in the middle of the night and that loved one is gone. You know, the thing is, this is, if you look at the polling, this is what people care about more than Hunter Biden. They, you know, more than Trump's family or Biden's family. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm parroting his talking points, but when you get right down to it, most people do care more about their own family than Hunter Biden or Trump's family.
And the laptop from hell was another phrase that used. Everybody say, what?
Yeah, the laptop from hell. Yes, I've had a few of those. I even had one that broke down on deadline in the middle of a debate.
And then you mentioned immigration, which of course has been Trump's calling card from the very beginning, but had not yet appeared as an issue in the debates. And this matter of the 544 kids that they separated from their parents really seems to have a lot of legs in the day after coverage. At least a lot of people have picked up on that, and Trump said, hey, what do you mean? It's all great. They got shampoo, they got everything. Like,
yes.
You know, that was kind of a moment as well.
Yes, if, you know, for every, you know, oil patch guy who didn't like what Biden had to say about fracking, I have to guess there were a lot of, you know, men, but certainly a lot of moms who were listening to him talk about kids being separated from the parents. And like you said, you know, he said, well, they're being very well taken care of. They're in a really good spot. I mean, I just think there are a lot of, I mean, that was, I think, like I said, I think if there was a moment that was not so good for Trump, it was that one. I mean, I think insensitive is kind of not the beginning of it.
Yeah. And what about his comeback? You built the cages, Joe, and sort of trying to get to Biden's left on the immigration issue.
Well, right. That's one of those, again, you built the cages, Joe. What does that mean, right? I mean, if you've been following along and you have your Doris Meisner decoder ring. She was an immigration commissioner from years back, right? If you had your Doris Meisner decoder ring, you might be, oh yes, the cages. The detention policy started under, and that's his argument, that the detention policy, did start under President Obama, but the family separation policy was a very conscious effort on the part of the Trump administration to deter people from coming. So, again, one of those moments where they're sort of talking past and talking over the heads of most people.
Yeah, which I thought also the foreign policy segment, which was pretty weak. The only thing they argued about was Kim Jong-il and whether he was a good person or a bad person. Which
it's funny because originally there were supposed to be 3 debates, and traditionally, to the extent we follow political tradition anymore these days, it was supposed to be devoted to foreign policy. And the Trump people made a big deal about, this is stacked against us. We want this whole thing to be about foreign policy because they feel they have a very good record. I'm sure the president would like to have talked about these Middle East peace deals between Israel and some of its Arab neighbors. Didn't have that chance. And yeah, I mean, foreign policy was just unless you were to count, well, you're corrupt at getting money from China. No, you're corrupt getting money from China and Ukraine. The foreign policy piece was just a smidge of the whole thing.
Yeah, and Trump's takeaway was, well, we haven't all been killed in a nuclear war, so I've succeeded. It was basically his point.
And well, not dying in a nuclear war is a good thing. I'm not going to argue with that.
Are you an undecided voter at this point? Are you one of the many undecided? And then your final takeaway was the mute button worked, I guess. Yeah. Almost as a deterrent, though.
Yeah, it was. Look, let's give credit to the moderator. She did a very, very good job.
Kristen.
Yeah, she did a good job. The mute button did work, and I think, but the fact is, as we said at the beginning, a different Donald Trump showed up. A different President Trump showed up. If President Trump had wanted to talk over her and been rude and been badgering and been belligerent, who knows how she would have handled that. And take nothing away from the moderator. It just helped that President Trump came in and dialed things down. Yeah. And the mute button did work. I mean, the mute button did give you, like we talked about the COVID thing, that discussion. I mean, the way it worked was at the beginning of each new topic or introduction of each subject, or when they had their opening and closing statements, the mute button was on. And, again, 2 minutes uninterrupted, which is probably more, you probably had more uninterrupted back and forth in the first 5 minutes of this debate than you did in the whole 90 minutes of the first debate.
So if we boil it all down, would you agree that basically Trump was using a turnout argument? In other words, he wasn't really trying to persuade anybody new. He was trying to gin up his base and get them to get 14 other people to come vote. And Biden is really more making a persuasion argument to kind of, give permission for people to come over to him because he's the president. He's the American president. He's the unifier.
Yeah, I think if President Trump was going all in on doing nothing but stirring people up, he could have gone in and done the whole bull in a China shop thing again. So to the extent that, the thinking was that maybe there are some people who, if you're calmer and see more reasons, you can bring them over. Marginally, yes. But, President Trump's not just his whole campaign, his whole presidency has been pitched to his supporters and expanding that base, and the supposition, and we'll learn in 11 days, that there are a great many people out there who are sympathetic to him, who might have voted for him, who will vote for him, who didn't turn out in 2016. I went over to Arizona and did a piece and talked to his folks there, and they said, they have 200,000 people, 200,000 voters in Arizona. I've seen numbers as high as like 800,000 in Michigan or Wisconsin. I can't remember which state, but the whole idea is that there are a great many people who are sympathetic to and supportive of Donald Trump, who presumably, they made the calculation, will be easier to mobilize and bring to the polls than trying to win over a whole bunch of skeptics or independents or people in the middle. And yes, Joe Biden's argument is very much, I mean, he said it last night and he said it repeatedly. I will be a president whether you vote for me or not. I will be the president for all America. And I don't know if you happened to, I don't know if you watched, I know it was painful for me. I know we're both Giants fans, painful as it was to watch the Dodgers in the World Series, although we got to root for the Marlins against them. There was that ad that ran during the World Series. The Biden commercial with this very plinky national anthem piano and this Sam Elliott narration talking about there are no Republican rivers, no Democratic mountains, we're one country. Joe Biden is very much ending on, interestingly, the message that launched Barack Obama. Let's remember, right?
Yeah.
Boston 2004. I remember there. I was at the Flint Center. We were in Boston, and this skinny guy with big ears gives this speech about there's no red America, there's no blue, and it was like, holy smokes, who is this guy? Biden's coming full circle back to that message, right? There's no red mountain, there aren't Republican mountains, there aren't Democratic rivers. Whether you vote for me or not, I'm going to be the president for everybody. It's a real contrast.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, CNN had their undecided voter caucus in North Carolina last night, and that was the thing that the people said resonated the most with them. And I think it was 9 out of 11 said, yeah, Biden won. And that was, I think everybody would like to, believe that they're a person who believes in that message. And not everybody, but a lot
Right.
of people. So I think that's a smart thing. But then getting back to the electoral arithmetic. So if Trump is able with this turnout thing to take up states that are in play that for him shouldn't be in play, i.e. Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, then it really would come down to Pennsylvania, would it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's really this simple. If Biden holds on to every state that Hillary Clinton won and wins those 3 states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, then it's over. Doesn't matter. He can lose Florida. He can win Georgia, he can lose all these quote battleground states. If Trump can win those 3 states again, then he'll be reelected. There's a path where if he holds on to his states and wins just one of those 3, he could be reelected. But it really looks like it's coming down, with some, I mean, then you just got to start looking at other states. It looks like Arizona. Yeah. And Arizona, I don't know off the top of my head, Wisconsin has 10 electoral votes. I think Arizona might have 13, so you can trade those states. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really going to come down to those states. But, from Biden's perspective, he doesn't need, all he needs is those 3 states. Hang on to what Hillary did. And it looks like he's going to, as we sit here today. It really comes down to those 3 states, and can he flip them back?
And they got more money than you can imagine. I mean, who would have thought that in January, that we'd be sitting here 11 days before the election and Biden would be trying to figure out where to spend his money?
And he's
scrambling.
As you mentioned, he's spending it in places like Texas that he doesn't need. He's going into Ohio. I mean, fun fact, no Republican president has ever been elected. No Republican has ever been elected president without Ohio. Very, very competitive state there. I don't know if we had this conversation the other day, but for those folks watching at home, we could have a call in Florida, 8:30, 9 o'clock California time. If Florida goes to Biden, then it's pretty much over. It's really hard to see how Trump could possibly lose Florida and win. But yeah, Biden is just rolling in money. I mean, they're doing stuff that, streaming services and stuff that I've never even heard of. They're putting money into, they're putting it into, I guess, video games. And it's like they have more money than they know what to do with.
But there are, of course, 11 days left. And 4 years ago, 11 days out was when James Comey famously said he was reopening the Hillary Clinton email. But what about her emails investigation? So who the hell knows what's going to happen? I mean, it's 2020, so there'll probably be a lot of stuff happening in the next 11 days. And the last thing is, just give me your take on this huge early voting thing. Are these all Democrats, or primarily Democrats, and Republicans are going to show up on election day so that the early numbers in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan are going to show a bump for Trump, while the mail-in things are going to be counted later?
But that's the supposition. I mean, huge, as I said, 52 million people. That's roughly off the top of my head, close to, I think there were like, I want to say 150 million votes cast, give or take, last time around. I mean, that's almost what, we're over a quarter of all the votes that were cast the last time. I mean, I think, people are just blowing the doors off. And folks who've examined this say there are a lot of first-time voters. There are a lot of new people coming out to the polls. I mean, yes, that is the supposition. Now, one thing, Democrats can get all excited when you see these numbers showing this huge Democratic turnout. There's a big question around that early vote.
Who is
Are Democrats voting now because they're super psyched? And so instead of waiting until November, they're rushing out to get their vote now. And basically, the term they use is cannibalizing. You're cannibalizing the election day vote. You're just getting it early. And there's going to be this huge wave of Republican votes. And we don't know. That is the supposition. The supposition is that Democrats are going to vote early, and then there's going to be this huge red wave. And then, yes, then you get into the whole thing about counting, and they're calling it the red mirage, that early on election night, it's going to show Trump doing great in all these states because they're counting all those votes. But, different states have different rules for counting. Florida's going to count their votes very, very quickly, which is the state I'm going to be watching on election night, because we should know that. Arizona, which comes later, they count their votes very, very quickly. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, those are key states, but I think they don't start counting their votes until election day. So we're not going to know until later that night. Again, so much of this predicated on the notion that if it's close, and if it's close, it could be a cliffhanger. If it's not, if Biden wins Florida, if Biden wins North Carolina, it could be a quick and early night. We won't know until we know.
Well, yeah.
How's that for Yogi Berra-ism?
Well, no, but you've identified the central question. I was talking to Paul Mitchell, who runs the service keeping track of ballots in California and all the campaigns use, and he compared it to you have a new restaurant and there's all these people at the restaurant. It's so crowded, it must be popular. He says, those are all the people that made reservations, and then the question is the walk-in trade going to show up too? And
right,
that's
right.
We don't know. So what do you do on election night?
I'm going to be writing the results. I'm going to be writing the lead all.
You're going to write the lead all?
Oh. I write the lead all. I'm going to start lead all duty. I think I'm supposed to do a big Sunday sweepy, this is the world piece for the Sunday paper, and I'll be doing the lead alls Monday, Tuesday, and I'm counting on this thing being done Wednesday, and then I got a reservation in Yosemite, and I cannot wait.
So what time? What's your first filing time on Tuesday? Tuesday.
If memory serves, from having done this before, they usually like to have a story up late afternoon, or like around 4 or so. Voters go to the polls. These problems are cropping up, blah, 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 a lot of sort of the background context of the race. And then, as the results come in through the night, I top it, early results, early returns showed so-and-so winning these early states, blah, 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 until we eventually have a call or don't. I mean, I've done this a lot of times. Obviously, Florida was quite the night. But people forget 4 years later, we didn't know election night. We didn't know until, I think it was around 11 o'clock California time, when we finally knew that W. Bush had been reelected, because Ohio was very, very close, and it was the second election in a row, and it was like, oh my goodness, here we go again. But when Ohio came in, it was not until, like I said, about 11 o'clock the next morning.
Yeah, that's right.
Others since then, Trump, Obama was very clear both times. Trump actually, as much as a surprise as it was, we knew by like 11 or so.
Yeah. Once I think it was Wisconsin was what tipped it. Well, just as a matter of professional interest. So back at when we worked for the San Francisco Morning Blatt, we'd have to do the 3-star, which was the early thing. Voters go
yes,
to the polls,
the 4-star
under cloudy skies. Then the 4-star, Contra Costa Cemetery District,
and the 4-star with a chaser.
Right. Then you went to the 5-star and probably about 5 or 6 write-throughs. So how many times will you write through, or do you have to write through constantly because of the web?
I'm writing through constantly. It's very funny. I've kind of come full circle, for good or bad, in my career. I mean, I started out as a wire service guy, right?
Yeah.
So you're writing, and it'd be like, 12th lead, right through, pick up 14th graph, blah, 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 and you write. So yeah, oh goodness. I think there were times when I've done maybe 11 or so iterations. It just depends how the night goes and when things get called. But yeah, I've done it. Like there have been like Super Tuesday, like I said, I might have done 11. So, this state tip, that state tip. So Yeah, I'll probably end up doing 5, 6, maybe more. Just kind of depends.
And you'll be hanging until when? 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or past that?
No, mercifully. I mean, I stay. We don't do the, we don't do the stars with the chaser anymore. We do the replate. So I think we can replay it as late on election night, probably as late as 1 or something. But at a certain point, mercifully, they let me go home. I've had occasions where a state or two are still out there, but I just go to bed. They have me pre-write so that, like, if the state falls or whatever, it's like, if Alaska goes this way, use this version. If Alaska goes that way, use that version. So I'll write some stuff, and then, by 2 or 3, I'm done.
Yeah.
Hoping for an early night. I've done them both ways. I've done Florida cliffhangers, and I've done ones where you file it and you're like, wow, it's done.
Yeah. Well, nobody does it better, brother. On the lead all, I got to say, you're the Johnny Apple of your generation in terms of how this stuff goes.
I appreciate that.
Listen, thanks for taking the time to talk, and we'll talk to you soon. And go Niners.
Yeah, go Niners and go Raiders. Still.
Yeah, the Raiders all have COVID, right? I think they took them off of Monday Night Football.
Oh, really?
I read a headline this morning. Yeah, you better check that out. You may want to get that in the A matter.
Yeah. There
I'll talk to you. Thanks, man.
All right, see ya.